Welcome to the Symposium of Heritage for All. My name is Lotte Portier and I am an intern Heritage and Museum Studies. In line of my article about the World Heritage Podium in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, I will talk about the 10 World Heritage Sites of the Netherlands. So, what is the World Heritage Podium? The World Heritage Podium in Amsterdam is an information point about World Heritage Sites in the Netherlands. It is a remarkable place because it's the only place in the world that has a national center about UNESCO World Heritage. The World Heritage Podium holds an exposition about the 10 national World Heritage Sites of the Netherlands. And the location of the podium is in the center of Amsterdam, and the center is also part of the 17th century canal district of Amsterdam. This is one of the most popular World Heritage Sites of the Netherlands. In 2013, the World Heritage Podium has opened to the public because the Dutch government wanted to create more publicity and knowledge about the Dutch UNESCO World Heritage among the Dutchmen. Together with the municipality of Amsterdam and the Dutch UNESCO Commission, the podium is for almost 5 years a starting point for visiting World Heritage in the Netherlands. From January 2014 until June 2014, I did my internship at the World Heritage Podium. And this was the starting period of the podium. So I assisted the office monuments and archaeology at the municipality of Amsterdam in the organization of the permanent and temporary exhibition at the World Heritage Podium. This internship was, for me, the beginning of my fascination for cultural heritage, and for this reason I wanted to write an article about the exhibition of this podium. It's a very special and beautiful exhibition about national UNESCO World Heritage that comes together in this place. So, in the article, you can read more about the World Heritage Podium and the beautiful exhibition that they hold. In this symposium, I will explain and tell you more about the UNESCO World Heritage of UNESCO. Netherlands has 10 inscriptions on the World Heritage list. These are 9 cultural heritage sites and 1 natural heritage sites. The Netherlands employs 3 teams for inscribing heritage sites on the tentative lists, and these teams are Country of Water, Design Country, and Civil Society. For each UNESCO World Heritage, I will give a brief explanation about the 10 World Heritage Sites and why they are special for the Netherlands and for mankind. So the first and most popular heritage site is the 17th century canal ring area of Amsterdam inside the Singelgracht. The historic urban ensemble of the canal district of Amsterdam was a project for a new port city built at the end of the 16th and beginning of the 17th century. It comprises a network of canals to the west and south of the historic Old Town, and a medieval port that encircled the Old Town and was accompanied by the repositioning inland of the city's fortified boundaries, the Singelgracht. This was a long-term program that involved extending the city by draining the swampland, using a system of canals in concentric arcs and filling in the intermediate spaces. These spaces allowed the development of a homogeneous urban ensemble, including gabled houses and numerous monuments. This urban extension was the largest and the most homogeneous of its time. It was a model of large-scale town planning and served as a reference throughout the world until the 19th century. The Amsterdam Canal District illustrates exemplary hydraulic and urban planning on a large scale through the entire artificial creation of a large-scale port city. The gabled facades and characteristics of this middle-class environment and the dwellings bear witnesses both to the city's enrichment through the maritime trade and the development of a humanist and tolerant culture linked to the Calvinist Reformation. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Amsterdam was seen as the realization of the ideal city that was used as a reference urban model for numerous projects for new cities around the world. So the second heritage site is Schokland and surroundings. Schokland was a peninsula that by the 15th century had become an island. Occupied and then abandoned as the sea eroded, it had to be evacuated in 1859. But following the draining of the Zuiderzee, it has since the 1940s formed part of the land reclaimed from the sea. Schokland has vestige of human habitation going back to prehistoric times. It symbolizes the heroic, age-old struggle of the people of the Netherlands against the encroachment of the waters. The struggle of the people of the Netherlands against water has endured for more than 6,000 years and still continues today. Without constant vigilance, more than half the present area of the country will be entirely submerged or subject to periodic inundation. Schokland was a peninsula that by the 15th century has become an island. As a result of the colossal reclamation program that began in the early years of the 20th century, Schokland and the settlement mounds and other human intervention that surrounded it stand as mute testimony to the skill and fortitude of the Dutch people in the face of this never-ceasing natural threat. The contours of the former island of Schokland above the flatlands of the reclaimed Noordoostpolder are still easy to trace in the topography within the former island. There are 4 large village terps, all of them protected archaeological sites. A 5th such site includes traces of Neolithic, Bronze Age and Iron Age settlements. The remains of dikes and terps located outside the present island reflect the former contours of the island and land that has been lost over the course of time. Also located outside the present island, but within the boundaries of the World Heritage Property, are more than 160 archaeological sites with remnants of prehistoric occupations. A church and church ruins, residential and commercial buildings, barns, a former harbor, and land division patterns, both old and new, go to complete the story of Schokland. The area provides exceptional evidence of a cultural tradition of island dwellers threatened by the water and ultimately evacuated. The first residents on the land reclaimed from the sea cultivated and developed that new land. The area is an exceptional example of a traditional type of settlement and land use that is representative of cultures, primarily when these have become vulnerable due to the influence of irreversible change. So the third World Heritage Site is the Rietveld Schröder House, and this house is in Utrecht, commissioned by Mrs. Truus Schroeder and designed by the architect Gerrit Thomas Rietveld and built in 1924. This small family house with its interior, the flexible spatial arrangement and the visual and formal qualities was a manifesto of the ideals of the stijlgroep of artists and architects in the Netherlands in the 1920s and has since been considered one of the icons of the modern movement in architecture. The house is in many ways unique. It is the only building of its type in Rietveld's output, and it also differs from other significant buildings of the early modern movement, such as Villa Savoy by Le Corbusier and the Villa Tugendhat by Mies van der Rohe. The differences lies in particular in the treatment of architectural space and in the conception of the functions of the building. Many contemporary architects were deeply influenced by the Schröder House, and this influence has endured up to this present. The quality of the Rietveld Schröder House lies in its having produced a synthesis of the design concept in modern architecture at a certain moment in time. Part of the quality of the house is the flexibility of its spatial arrangement, which allows gradual changes over time in accordance with changes in functions. At the same time, the building has also many artistic merits, and its visual image had strongly influences building design in the second half of the 20th century. The interiors and furniture are an integral part of its design and should be given due recognition. The Rietveld Schroeder House was located on the edge of the city of Utrecht, close to the countryside at the end of the 20th century row of houses. It was built against the wall of the adjacent brick house. The area beyond the house remained undeveloped because it contains 19th century Dutch defense lines, which were still in use at the time. So the fourth heritage site is the mail network at Kinderdijk Elshout. The outstanding contribution made by the people of the Netherlands to the technology of handling water is admirably demonstrated by the installations in the Kinderdijk Elshout area. Construction of hydraulic works for the drainage of land for agricultural and settlement began in the Middle Ages and have continued uninterruptedly to the present day. The mail network at Kinderdijk Elshout is a group of buildings in an exceptional human-made landscape in which the centuries-long battle of the Dutch people to drain parts of the territory and protect them against further inundation is dramatically demonstrated through the survival of all the major elements of the complex system that was devised for this purpose. Construction of hydraulic works for the drainage of land for agriculture and settlement began. The property illustrates all the typical features associated with technology, such as polders, high and low-lying drainage, and transport channels for superfluous polder water, embankments and dikes, such as 19 drainage mills, 3 pumping stations, 2 discharge sluices, and 2 waterbird assembly houses. The beautifully preserved mills can be divided into 3 categories: 8 round bricks ground sailors, 10 thatched octagonal smoke mills, and 1 hollow post mill. The installations in the Kinderdijk Elshout area demonstrated admirably the outstanding contribution made by the people in the Netherlands to the technology of handling water. The landscape is striking in its juxtaposition of its horizontal features, represented by the canals, the dikes, and the fields, with the vertical rhythms of the mill system. There is no drainage network of this kind or of comparable antiquity anywhere else in the Netherlands or in the world. So the 5th World Heritage Site is the Wouda steam pumping station. And the Wouda pumping station at Lemmer in the province of Friesland opened in 1920. It is the largest steam pumping station ever built and is still in operation. It represents the high point of the contribution made by the Netherlands engineers and architects in protecting their people and land against the natural forces of water. It is a masterpiece of the work of Dutch hydraulic engineers and architects whose significant contribution in this field is unchallenged. It was the largest and the technically most advanced steam pumping station in the world, and at the time it was built, and it has remained so ever since. The Wouda steam pumping consists of the pumping station with boiler house, chimney, and coal storage depot, the inlet sluice at the Terholsterkolk, the drainage canal, the outlet in front of the pumping station and the inlet sluice, the sea dikes along the IJsselmeer, with the pumping station itself functioning as a sea barrier, and the surrounding wide expanse of pasture land has its outstanding value as a wall and is of high visual quality with respect to the landscape. The pumping station itself is a steam-driven installation to prevent flooding of the low-lying areas of Friesland. So the sixth World Heritage Site of the Netherlands is the historic area of Willemstad, inner city and harbor Curaçao. The people of the Netherlands established a trading settlement at a fine natural harbor on the Caribbean island of Curaçao in 1634. The town developed continuously over the following centuries. The modern town consists of several distinct historic districts whose architecture reflects not only European urban planning concepts, but also styles from the Netherlands and from the Spanish and Portuguese colonial towns, with which Willemstad engaged in trade. The historic area of Willemstad is an example of a colonial trading and administrative settlement. It was established by the Dutch on the island of Curaçao, situated in the southern Caribbean near the tip of South America. Starting with the construction of Fort Amsterdam in 1634 on the eastern bank of St. Anna Bay, the town developed continuously over the following centuries. The modern town, the capital of the island nation of Curaçao, consists of several distinct historic districts, reflecting different eras of colonial town planning and development. Punda, the oldest part of the city, was built in the 7th century on the eastern side of St. Anna Bay. Adjacent to Fort Amsterdam, and is the only part of the city that has a defense system, consisting of walls and ramparts. The other three historic urban districts, Pietermaai, Otrobanda and Scharlu, date from the 18th century. Waterford and Redford, also included in the inscribed property, were built in the late 1820s as part of a more extensive series of fortifications. In the midst of the historic area is a natural deep water harbor. The entire property encompasses 86 hectares and is surrounded by 87-hectare buffer zone. The architecture of Willemstad has been influenced not only by the Dutch colonial concepts, but also by the tropical climate and architectural styles from towns through the Caribbean region, with which the settlement engaged in trade. Early residences constructed in Punda followed Dutch urban design. In the 18th century, local materials and craftsmanship, as well as new architectural elements, such as galleries, began to appear. As the city expanded beyond Punda, the architectural style of the residents evolved. For example, the development of Otrobanda was not restricted by ramparts and houses, were built on spacious lots and resembled plantation houses surrounded by galleries. Moreover, the social and cultural differences from Afro-American, Iberian, and Caribbean inhabitants have contributed to enriching the building traditions as well as the city's cultural life. This results in a European architectural style with regional adaptations in a rich array of Caribbean colors. The colorful buildings of Willemstad are a local tradition dating from 1817, when the previous style of white lime finish on a building exterior was prohibited, apparently to protect eyesight from the glare. Predominant colors are red, blue, yellow, and various shades of green. Willemstad is an exceptionally well-preserved example of a Dutch colonial trading settlement. Due to the interchange of cultures, it shares a common cultural history with other counterpart cities in the Caribbean region, which is a very particular aspect of the property. The unique setting in a natural harbor qualifies the historic area of Willemstad as a rare example of a historic port town laid out in a setting of natural waters. So the seventh cultural heritage site is the Beemsterpolder, and the Beemsterpolder is dating from the early 17th century as an exceptional example of reclaimed land in the Netherlands. It has preserved intact its well-ordered landscape of fields, roads, canals, dikes, and settlements laid out in accordance with classical and Renaissance planning principles. The Beemsterpolder is a cultural landscape located north of Amsterdam, dating from the early 17th century, and an exceptional example of reclaimed land in the Netherlands. It was created by the draining of Lake Beemster in 1612 in order to develop new agricultural land and space for country residences and to combat flooding in this low-lying region. It also provided a means for capital investment in land. Other earlier land reclamation had taken place, but technical improvements in windmill technology permitted more ambitious undertakings. The Beemsterpolder was the first large project covering an area of 7,200 hectares. Today it is a well-ordered agricultural landscape of field, roads, canal dikes and settlements. The polder was laid out in a rational geometric pattern developed in accordance with principles of classical and Renaissance planning. This mathematical land division was based on a system of square forming a rectangle with an ideal dimension ratio of 2 to 3. A series of oblong slots measuring 180 meters by 900 meters form the basic dimension of the allotment. 5 of these slots make up a unit, a model of 900 meters by 900 meters, and 4 units create a larger square. The pattern of roads and watercourses runs north to south and east to west, with buildings along the roads. The short sides of the lots are connected by drainage, canals, and access roads. The polder itself follows the outline of the lake, and the direction of the squares corresponds as much as possible with the former shoreline, so as to avoid creating unusable lots. Besides the grid pattern of roads, watercourses, and plots of lands, the polder is made up of a ring dike, a ring canal, and relatively high roads with avenues of trees. Several villages were planned for the polder, and today these are Midden-Beemster, Noord-Beemster, West-Beemster, and Zuid-Oud-Beemster. Protected monuments include religious, residential, and farm buildings from the 17th to 19th century, industrial buildings, for example, a mill, a smithy, water authority buildings, and bridges, as well as the 5 forts constructed between 1880 and 1920, which formed part of the defense line of Amsterdam. So the 8th heritage site of the Netherlands is the defense line of Amsterdam. And extending 135 kilometers around the city of Amsterdam, this defense line, which is built between 1883 and 1920, is the only example of a fortification based on the principles of controlling the water. Since the 16th century, the people of the Netherlands have used their expert knowledge of hydraulic engineering for defense purposes. The center of the country was protected by a network of 45 armed forts, acting in concert with temporarily flooding from polders and an intricate system of canals and locks. The defense line of Amsterdam is a complete ring of fortifications extending more than 135 kilometers around the city of Amsterdam. Built between 1883 and 1920, the ring consists of an ingenious network of 45 forts acting in concert with an intricate system of dikes, sluices, canals, and inundation polders, and is a major example of fortification based on the principles of temporary flooding of the land. Since the 16th century, the people in the Netherlands have used their special knowledge of hydraulic engineering for defense purposes. The area around the fortifications is divided into polders, each at a different level and surrounded by dikes. Each polder has its own flooding facility. The depth of flooding was a critical factor in the stelling's success. The water had to be too deep to wade, and too shallow for boats to sail over. Water levels were maintained by means of inlet sluices and barrage sluices. Forts were built at strategic locations where roads on railroad cut through the defense line. They were carefully situated at intervals of no more than 3,500 meters. the spacing between determined by the range of the artillery in the forts. The earlier ones were built of brick, the later of massed concrete. The land forts have an important place in the development of military engineering worldwide. They mark the shift from the conspicuous brickstone casemated forts of the Montalembert tradition, in favor of the steel and concrete structures that were to be brought to their highest level of sophistication in the Maginot and Atlantic Wall fortifications. Combination of fixed positions with the deployment of mobile artillery to the intervals between the forts was also advanced in this application. The ninth World Heritage Site of the Netherlands is the Waddenzee, and Waddenzee is the largest unbroken system of intertidal sand and mud flats in the world. The site covers the Dutch Waddenzee Conservation Area, the German Waddenzee National Parks of Lower Saxony and Schleswig-Holstein, and most of the Danish Waddenzee Maritime Conservation Area. It is a large, temperate, relatively flat coastal wetland environment formed by the intricate interaction between physical and biological factors that has given rise to a multitude of transnational habitats, with tidal channels, sandy shoals, seagrass meadows, mussel beds, sandbars, mud flats, salt marshes, estuaries, beaches, and dunes. The area is home to numerous plant and animal species, including marine mammals such as the harbor seal, grey seal, and harbor porpoise. Waddenzee is one of the last remaining large-scale intertidal ecosystems where natural processes continue to function largely undisturbed. The 1,001,343 hectare World Heritage property encompasses a multitude of transnational zones between land, the sea, and freshwater environments, and is rich in species especially adapted to the demanding environmental conditions. It is considered one of the most important areas for migratory birds in the world and is connected to a network of other key sites for migratory birds. Its importance is not only in the context of the East Atlantic Flyway, but also in the critical role it played in the conservation of African Eurasian migratory water birds. In the Waddenzee, up to 6.1 million birds can be present at the same time, and an average of 10 to 12 million pass through it each year. So the last heritage site is the Vanillefabriek. And the Vanillefabriek was designed and built in 1920s on the banks of a canal in the Spaanse industrial zone of Rotterdam. The site is one of the icons of the 20th industrial architecture, comprising a complex of factories with facades consistently essentially of steel and glass, making large-scale use of the curtain wall principle. It was conceived as an ideal factory open to the outside world, whose interior working spaces evolved according to need, and in which daylight was used to provide pleasant working conditions. It embodies the new kind of factory that became a symbol of the modernist and functionalist culture of the interwar period and bears witnesses to long commercial and industrial history of the Netherlands in the field of importation and processing of food products from tropical countries and their industrial processing for marketing in Europe. Designed and built in the 1920s, the Vanillefabriek demonstrates an extremely accomplished industrial architecture. It comprises a complex of buildings consisting of several factories aligned along the perspective of a large internal roadway and close to several means of transportation. Supported on an internal structure of reinforced concrete, the facades of the main building consist essentially of steel and glass, making large-scale use of the curtain wall principle. Via a common purpose agreed between the entrepreneur and the project's architects and engineers, the Vanillefabriek embodies an ideal factory open to the outside world, whose interior working spaces are progressive, and in which daylight is used to provide pleasant working conditions. It embodies the accomplished realization of a new kind of factory that has become a symbol of the modernist and functionalist culture of the interwar period. Lastly, it bears witness to the long port-related economic tradition of the Netherlands in the processing of imported food products, such as coffee, tea, and tobacco, and their marketing in Europe. So this was my symposium about World Heritage in the Netherlands. If you want to read more about World Heritage in the Netherlands and the World Heritage Podium in Amsterdam, go to my article on Facebook or on the Heritage for All website. I would like to thank you for listening and hope you have a great weekend.